Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sir Hunt on X on this 3rd of November, 2025. As I come to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America. Here's someone had themselves a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. Lots of craziness over the weekend for the NFL season. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful and safe trick-or-treating night on the 31st of October. Always a good thing at this time of year. Going to get right down to it. It's basically, it was week 9 yesterday of the NFL. Of course, tonight with Arizona and Dallas. Lots of wild circumstances with that. I'll touch on it here in a second. Then we're going to get right down to the games real quick. So I'm going to touch on some of the bigger moments and some of the more key games because a lot of these were just blowouts all over the place. So, of course, with playoffs approaching, that's going to be my focal point from moving forward. Of course, a big one, maybe it was a bit of a shocker, but maybe we shouldn't be, is Pittsburgh over Indy. The Steelers defense finally got themselves going after a crappy start, and we know what happened last couple of weeks against Cincinnati and Green Bay to that defense. They just got cooked, but they showed up, and of course, the Daniel Jones and the New York Giants version showed up, which played right into the Steelers' hands. But it was certainly a must-win for Pittsburgh because we know Baltimore is going to be coming for them for that division title, and just to find a way to stem the tide for now, they needed it, and just for confidence sake, they needed the win. They got it. Defense was stellar. T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith got sacks. Of course, T.J. Watt had the forced fumble early. That defense got going. Offense was did just enough to win the game. Indy is going to be fine. The offensive line just got cooked. As I said, the defense slowed down Jonathan Taylor. That was pretty much it. Good home win for Pittsburgh. They needed it because the Baltimore Ravens are coming for that division, and whatever they got to do to hold off Baltimore to try and stem the tide for now, you need to start getting wins because you let two gimmies against Cincinnati and Green Bay slip because your defense didn't show up. Just for the sake of the defense's confidence, they needed this win, and they got it. Now, a couple of other ones I'll touch on here before we get to the main events. It was Carolina over Green Bay. Godspeed, Tucker Kraft. Unfortunate, the ACL injury. Of course, Matthew Golden got hurt. But once again, Rico Dwaddle, if you're a fantasy owner, you have Rico Dwaddle, congratulations. You did it again. The guy's just absolutely been phenomenal carrying the Carolina Panthers on his back, and he did it again against a tough defense at the Green Bay Packers. Still won here, but still unfortunate what happened with Green Bay and that particular offense. Play calling I thought was a bit weird on the Packers end. Well, most of this entire game, I don't know what was going on. But the Packers, again, another case of a team that people want to call a contender, but it's still plays like this and games like this that hold teams back or people back from calling them a contender because they haven't put anything consistent so far this season for the most part. I mean, they made a trade for Micah Parsons. You would think after the good start, they would be the team to beat in the NFC. They had the tough loss at Cleveland, the embarrassing draw at Dallas, and now this. That's why people are pausing when it comes to them being a contender in the NFC because there are other teams we still have. I mean, still Philly, the Rams, Tampa Bay, among many others. But long term, I think they're going to be fine. But there's a lot of kinks they're going to need to start working out because that game yesterday, I don't even know what their play calling was for the most part. Yeah, losing guys like Tucker Kraft and even a Matthew Golden hurt. It did. I'm not ignoring that. But this team should be better than what they are. And that's going to be something to look at moving forward. But for Carolina, as I said, you fantasy owners who have Rico Dwaddle, keep rolling with him because he's carrying the Panthers. He's doing his job carrying that team. He's the man right now. And if you have him on your fantasy, congratulations. You've piled up some fantasy points. I'll be talking about some fantasy points on a running back that I hit the lottery on here in a minute. And it was the Patriots over the Falcons. The Drake May hot talk sort of cooled down a little bit. Wasn't necessarily all that great. But the defense just did this job to slow down Atlanta. Patriots 7-2. Everyone's making this hubbub about their record as to how good they are in the AFC. I never saw one team and one person pick them to win the AFC. I mean, anyone's picking them to win AFC East. It's still Buffalo's division, and everyone's doing a hubbub for and against this Patriots team, thinking they're going to win the division or the AFC. I didn't see anybody that picked them. I still don't see anyone that picked them because the jury's still out. They got Tampa Bay this week. They have back-to-back games at home against Buffalo and Baltimore, which is going to tell us a lot about them. And I know they have the easy games against the Jets, the Dolphins, and Cincinnati coming up, but you can only play who's in front of you. You got to give them their due. Mike Vrabel from the Belichick tree has turned that thing around to where they're 6-2. Everybody thought they was going to be a playoff team, and they're going to be headed that way. Everyone's trying to act like they're not great because of the teams they're playing against. That's why they play the games. What do you think what happened here in Cincinnati 2 weeks ago when the winless Jets beat the Bengals? I mean, you can only play the games that are in front of you, and that's what the Patriots are doing. And that's how you take care of business. Now, does it mean they're going to win the division or they're going to win the AFC? Probably not, because there's still a Buffalo and a Kansas City and a Baltimore still in the mix. But let's not act like what they're doing so far is absolutely nothing, because they're doing something right to be 7-2. Because some of those games they would lose last year. Now, Grant, part of it is they're tanking. We're tanking versus this year where they're trying to go to the playoffs, and they made a whole slew of moves that helped them. Let's not act like this team is just 7-2 just because something was gift wrapped to them, because it wasn't. You can only play who's in front of you. You can beat who's in front of you. That's what the New England Patriots are doing. Drake May's ascended to a pretty darn good quarterback right now, probably in the top 15. I could probably say top 10, but that's probably a stretch. They're doing something right. Mike Vrabel has them playing good, sound football. You can only play who's in front of you, so you got to give them their due. They're going to get their 10 wins and 10 to 11 wins, and they're going to make the playoffs, whether people like it or not. What does it mean in the playoffs? We'll see when the time comes. Anything can happen, but this is the direction that they're headed. Just because they're playing teams who can't can't crack an egg right now doesn't mean they're not a good team. That's how you handle business against teams with losing records. You beat them regardless of who you are or who your opponent is. That's why it's called Any Given Sunday for a reason. All the people in the Patriots hate wagon need to just chill out for a minute. Actually, now I'm going to go to some of the main event games because a few of these have some real intriguing storylines here. And it was yesterday, the return of J.J. McCarthy, who was just absolutely phenomenal when they beat the Lions, his first start. But the story here was the Vikings defense just torched the crap out of the Minnesota Detroit offense, who was a machine coming into this game, and they basically just got shut down, especially that they put the clamps on the 1-2 running back of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. They got nothing going. And J.J. McCarthy made the plays he had to make. You got to give him that. And that's all he had to do. And basically, the Vikings defense, I said, with Brian Flores, they have a front seven that can wreak havoc if they really wanted to. We talk about the defensive front, especially guys like Javon Hargrave in the middle there. And they could, a brilliant defensive mind like Brian Flores, that defense could wreak havoc on anyone they wanted to. And they did it yesterday against Detroit and got the win. I said, there's still games to be played in the NFC North, which has 4 teams with 5 wins right now, which is crazy. Minnesota is in it. That defense is going to be a problem for any offense in the league. Depends on the quarterback play of J.J. McCarthy, who was solid for the most part, did his job. Minnesota got the win. Don't write off the Minnesota Vikings just yet. Because probably the best thing that happened was Carson Wentz going down and J.J. McCarthy coming back after the bye and the mini bye, and looks like they're going to do something in the NFC North. That division is far from over. Remember last year, I think they had like all 3 teams with 11 wins. That's to say how the competitive the NFC North was. Looks like it's going to be the same thing again this year. And yesterday in Houston, an odd game between the Broncos and the Texans. I caught the tail end of this after as I was headed out to watch the Chiefs and Bills. This Broncos team, their defense is lights out. I mean, we know this. I mean, that front, I told Minnesota's front seven, the Broncos' front seven is just as lethal. That offense with that personnel is so much on peaks and valleys. You want to think they're capable of so much better. I mean, I get it. They played the The Texans, whose defense is solid themselves, and were basically just playing for their season for the most part yesterday. But this Denver offense, with J.K. Dobbins having a resurrection, and of course you have R.J. Harvey backing him up, and Bo Nix, who should be better than what he is, there's so much on peaks and valleys. I mean, there's not enough consistency. That defense is going to be lights out. We know it. But here with this one, they just did whatever they had to do to win. Because it was a game, it was basically one of those ugly, muck it up defensive struggles, where basically the score was what I thought it was going to be in that particular ballpark, because two stout defenses against two offenses who were basically hit and miss all season long. But the Broncos came through. Unfortunately, the circumstance with C.J. Stroud, Godspeed, get well soon. Everybody's making a big hubbub out of the play that took him out. I get it. It's because Sean Payton, with what he did in New Orleans with Bountygate, we know the story with that one. That has nothing to do with it. Doesn't help the fact that C.J. Stroud was behind an offensive line who the Texans invested in and still can't protect them. And it caught up to them yesterday. But the Broncos got the win. They're 7-2. I mean, you could probably say you could have been 9-0 because there were two walk-off field goals from being 9-0. That tells you how good they. I mean, you have to give them their due, especially that defense, which is lights out. Especially winning on the defensive side without Pat Surtain, which is saying a whole lot. But the big game coming up in a couple of weeks when Kansas goes over there is going to probably be for the AFC West title. That's going to be a clash of the Titans. May the best team win that one. I'll be looking forward to that. And speaking of Kansas City, it was the big one last night against the Buffalo Bills. And it's the regular season win. Okay, it's a regular season win. Nothing more, nothing less. But the crazy thing is some of the Chiefs' play calls in this game, as I was watching this, it's a bit of an eyebrow raiser. We consider everything. And Patrick Mahomes had probably one of the worst games of his career, but they still almost found a way to get it done. And of course, there needs to be conversation about Tyler Bass, who doesn't know how to kick the ball left of the right upright because he did it again for the second time in 3 years. Doink. I mean, a 3-year-old could have kicked that field goal a lot better than Tyler Bass. That should tell you how bad Tyler Bass is as a kicker for Buffalo. But Josh Allen was a near perfection last night. You got to give him that. And we have a running back like James Cook who helps him out to take pressure off of him. That's how you're going to win ball games. The Chiefs defense was asleep for most of this game for I don't know what reason, because I didn't see any pressure dial up by Steve Spagnuolo, their outstanding defensive coordinator. And Buffalo's offense just did basically anything they want to when they surpassed 400 yards of offense. And that's usually the kind of game where Steve Spagnuolo dials up the pressure, dials up the defense, and finds a way to get clutch plays, and they didn't. Something was missing yesterday, just for yesterday, but in the long term, the Chiefs will be fine. Buffalo needed that game more than Kansas City did, because Kansas City's still going to win that. I still think they're still going to win that division and get into the playoffs. People think that they're not going to make the playoffs. I think it's just absolutely crazy. But Kansas City's going to be fine. Buffalo needed that because they're trying to stay pace with New England for that AFC East title, which, right now it's still up for grabs. Still lots of football left to be played. But Buffalo's offense played about as perfect on offense as you could possibly play. You got to give them their due, especially the 1-2 punch of Josh Allen and James Cook. And I said the James Cook signing or in the offseason was what the doctor ordered for both him and the team. It showed yesterday. Now to what took place Sunday night. I know I'm going to talk about Bears and the Bengals. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I got this off my chest. What took place last night? Well, let's start with this out of the way. Shout out to Sam Darnold, who was perfect in the first half, 16 for 16, 282 yards. Jackson Smith-Njigba ascending to a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, especially out of the slot where he and Darnold just have a lethal connection going on. And Smith-Njigba is just absolutely tearing it up as a wide receiver. No matter how good your defense is, good luck trying to slow that guy down. But when you think about what happened at the end, when you were down 38-7, you're the Washington Commanders. You have your franchise quarterback, Jaden Daniels, who just came off a hamstring injury, and the game was over. He's still on the field. We saw what happened in the red zone. The tackle that turned his elbow sideways, which from what I heard wasn't as bad as it looked. Fortunately, goodness. So we see this in the NBA. I don't know. We don't see more of this in the NFL. When you're up that big, why don't you just sit guys and just kill the time? And we see this all the time in the NBA when a team is up by 50, like going into the third or fourth quarter, they park them and they bring the deep end reserves to just finish out the game so nobody gets hurt. Why don't we do this more in the NFL? And last night was a perfect example of it. Why would Dan Quinn leave his franchise quarterback, who they drafted second overall, led them to the NFC title game, and just got back from injury, leaving him on the field in a game that was basically over, and see that happen to him? This falls solely on Dan Quinn because he made the choice. Now he has to live with it. And now Jaden Daniels is going to be gone. Actually, if he were smart, he wouldn't come back this season because Washington's not even going to the playoffs. Forget that. And why would you resort to that, risking your franchise quarterback on that play and a game that was over? We should. My surprise is we don't see enough of this in the NFL where games are out of hand and guys should be sitting. And when you do this in a game that was basically over, I mean, there's no 31-point plays in the NFL, and that happens, it's going to come back to bite you. And that's what happened last night in Washington. And it was just an awful loss all the way around, where basically Seattle just put up 330 yards in that Washington defense, who had an all-in approach going into the season after their NFC title run, and it's backfired. They're more likely not going to make the playoffs. I mean, they have to play lights out the rest of the way, probably win out, have luck come their way if they can make it. So good luck with that one, Washington. That's why I wasn't like the idea of them going all in the way they did. I mean, they brought in the corpse of Von Miller. That's been a failure. Marcus Lattimore, who they forked out a boatload of draft capital to get from New Orleans. That's a failure. Apparently he blew his knee. He's done for the season. The way that Washington went about it after the run last season was a bad backfire, coughing up, I think, something like 8 draft picks to get guys on the tail end of their careers to have an all-in approach, and it hasn't panned out. And now you lost your franchise quarterback, likely for the season. Not a great look for Washington, because that's what you can expect when you have an all-in approach by forking draft capital on the players in the back end of their deals. Now for Seattle, that front four is nasty as it gets. I said that it started when they got Byron Murphy, when they drafted him out of Texas a couple years ago. Of course, they got Leonard Williams, among many others, on that defensive front. And of course, we know Mike McDonald from his tenure in Baltimore as their defensive coordinator. The front seven there who was formidable. Bringing this imprint, that front seven is nasty as it got. And they brought Devin Witherspoon back to help out the secondary. That defense is serious business. Showed it last night. They're a contender for the NFC West title with the Rams. They're going to be a problem moving forward. And as long as Sam Darnold doesn't go back to being Sam Darnold and play like he did last night, and you have a wide receiver like Jackson Smith and Jeba doing what he does, and of course you have Kenneth Murray as one of the premier runners, that team is going to be a problem in the NFC. They say sleepers in Seattle? Well, you better be sleepless, because they're coming and they're going to be a problem, especially at least in the NFC West, whereas 3 teams, the Rams, the Seahawks, and the 49ers competing for that title. There's going to be some pretty darn good slugfest between those 3 teams moving on. Always a wild scene in the Great Northwest. I mean, I was there for a couple of the Seahawks games during the apex of the Legion of Boom. That stadium up there, the Link, it's a unique, awesome atmosphere. If you're a fan, or even if you're not a fan, if you want to see what a stadium atmosphere is like, go up to Seattle, Washington. It's something of its own. Very unique. Now we touch on what took place yesterday over here. And there's a lot more to unpack. And as much as I want to dunk on this, at this point, I'm just going to say one thing. You're getting what you asked for. It's plain and simple. The Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media are getting exactly what they asked for. The results will do the generation. And as Bill Parcells eloquently said, you are what your record says you are. I'm just going to leave it at that, because there's nothing more to say. The real Joe, as in Joe Flacco, is doing all he can for a guy who's 40 years old. I mean, he had the 2 picks or the one at the end of the game, Hail Mary. I'm not even going to count that. Doing all he can to keep the Bengals season alive, carrying this offense just dropping dime after dime after dime, including the crazy one to T. Higgins right into Higgins' hands that got the touchdown. And a great effort by Higgins for the catch. Also, got to give him that. He's doing all he can to carry this offense to victories. And it doesn't help when you have a Bengals fan base, the Cincinnati media, and the Bengals coaching staff who just crap the bed, especially on the defensive side, because they can't tackle a statue to save their lives. That's exactly what it came down to yesterday. Joe Flacco, at age 40, doing what he can to carry this offense, and he's doing everything he can to carry it. And he's doing this with a bad shoulder. I tell you, apparently he had an AC joint, had an injection before the game. Doing all he can to carry this offense to the victory because the guy's just nothing short of sensational. But it doesn't help that the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media want to act the way they do, carry themselves the way they do, and find a way to ruin it. Because that is what happened yesterday, especially after the go-ahead touchdown, after the onside kick recovery. They wanted to carry themselves like a bunch of jerks again. And because of it, the Bears came back and scored the go-ahead and what turned out to be the game-winning touchdown. Karma has come onto the doorstep of the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media. They're ruining the terrific effort of a 40-year-old quarterback in Joe Flacco, who's just doing all he can to carry that offense. And he's done a lot of carrying. He's certainly done that by just the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media just simply want to act like jerks. And because of it, that's why they lost yesterday. Everything falls on them. I can rehash the whole Burrow, Chase, and Higgins contract thing, which I've done about 50 times. I'm not going to do that again because it's beating a dead horse. They don't know how to understand it because they're so short-minded and so short-sighted. But everything that's happened the last 2 weeks with the Jets and the Bears falls on the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media for how they've conducted themselves. That's why they've lost those games. I can touch on all the locker room stuff, which I'll do that here in a second. But that's second fiddle compared to the behavior of the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media. But Joe Flacco has done everything he can to carry this offense, and he's done that. And we have two premier wide receivers like Cincinnati does, and a quarterback who knows the game like Joe Flacco does and is carrying it the way he is. You should be able to find ways to pull it out. Why doesn't that happen? The behavior of the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media. That's why they lost the last two games. Now we're going to get to the fun stuff. That is the locker room. And you want to talk about losing a locker room? The Bengals find ways to do that. Actually, the best one, I want to read this one real quick. This has come from a well-respected beat writer named Mike Petraglia, who apparently talked to the longtime special teams coach, Darren Simmons. This is about the short kick that was missed by Evan McPherson. I'm going to read this word for word. You guys can make your adjustment. I'll respond after I'm done with it. It says, Evan McPherson's short kick on a 54-yard field goal came with a QB ball, not a kick ball, all because a goal unit came after the play clock started. The kicker had to use a QB ball. You're trying to tell me you don't know how to prepare for a field goal when you've been in this for as long as you have? You're trying to tell me that team, filled with guys who have been on that roster, doesn't know how to set up a field goal the right way? Now, it's bad enough we have Bengals fans and Cincinnati media acting like clowns. Now we have the special teams coach, one of the longtime mainstays for almost 2.5 decades, at least if I can remember, coming up with this excuse as to why a field goal was missed. You're trying to tell me because of a different style ball, a kick was missed. A 54-yarder. Which I said all along, it was after the Flacco was called for a questionable intentional grounding, which I thought they should have gone for it because, the defense was just absolutely abysmal. We know that. They should have gone for it regardless. You're meaning to tell me that the only reason why a field goal was missed is because he had the wrong ball? Or because the guy had the wrong ball? That's something Bengals fans and Cincinnati media come up with. And you find a way to bring yourself down to that level, especially a longtime special teams coach like Darren Simmons, who's one of the more credible ones for the longest time here in Cincinnati, and just made himself look like a fool. Congratulations. You just made yourself look like a fool. Don't know what the hell to say after that one. And as much as I want to pile on to all of this, I just learned something before I came on here. You got to let sleeping dogs lie. And that's what I'm going to do from this point forward, because The karma has come. The karma has come to the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media for their terrible behavior and the way they've carried themselves over the last 5 years. And right now, they're getting it, and it's a thing of beauty. And as I said before, and I'll wrap this up, they've crashed and burned worse than Enron because they don't know how to carry themselves. Everything that's happened falls on the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media. They're pinning everything on Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin and ownership. I quit blaming them because nothing's going to happen to them. I mean, what good is it going to do me? So, Bengals fans and Cincinnati media, spare me your hypocrisy. You guys are getting what you deserve. Karma came knocking on your door. And now, I'm just going to let karma do their thing. My job is finished. Now, for the Chicago Bears, thank you, Kyle Managi. You got me my fantasy points because he was a last-minute waiver wire for me on my fantasy team. I picked him up. I got fantasy points from the guy. Thank you very much for that one. Same with you, Colson Loveland, especially when the game-winning touchdown because Bengals fans wanted to act like jerks. Congratulations. You did that. Thank you for all the fantasy points. I needed it because I won my week because of you two. I just got to say that. So I'm just going to wrap that up. As much as I want to dunk on anybody, I ain't going to. They're getting their karma right now in Cincinnati. The Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media. Anything I say at this point is not going to, it doesn't add on. As much as I want to dunk on them more, I just learned one thing. When Enron crashed and burnt at the business sector, everybody know what happened with Enron back then. They were done. And we're getting to that point here with the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media with how they could carry themselves since the 2015 playoff loss of Pittsburgh all the way through the excuses they made in losing the 2022 AFC title game to Kansas City to now. Anything you guys do at this point, you prove my point. And anything I say is basically useless. I mean, the karma has come, and it's just a thing of beauty. I told you all along, you should have demanded Burrow, Chase, and Higgins paid top dollar. You guys show your cowardice and wanted it. And now, look at what's happened as a result. And now, you're about to have probably some of those guys out the door. But I'm not going to pile on. I'll just retire it from here because I have better things to do. Worried about the biggest group of cowards walking God's green earth right now, known as the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, because that's what they are. I'll just let them be cowards because I have better things to do. That'll wrap it up. Now, before I proceed into other things, interesting news that took place over the weekend was the Nebraska signing of extension of the head coach Matt Rhule. He was already signed through 2030. Now extended him to the year 2032. And this is a coach who has an 18-16 record. It was 18-15 before the USC game, which USC won. You're trying to tell me you signed a 2-year extension for a guy till 2032 when with a guy who's basically a 500 coach? That's why that program has been a laughingstock since Tom Osborne left. And we know, excuse me, I apologize. We know the legacy that the Nebraska program was when Tom Osborne and especially a quarterback like Tommy Frazier was there. And ever since they left, that's why they've been one of the laughingstocks across the nation. And this is another example of it. I mean, they try to find a way to some credibility in recent years. I mean, granted, he did something right. He's a 500 coach above. But the guy's already signed at 2030. Why are you signing this guy to a 2-year extension for a guy who's basically 2 games over 500? And that program hasn't had a relevant win in about a couple years. That's why, since Tom Osborne left, that program's gone to the gutter. Even though they're supposedly on the upturn, why would you extend a guy who's already there till the end of the decade 2 more years? He was basically a 500 coach. You know what's going to happen? That when the buyout time comes, it goes from $5 million to $15 million, and good luck with that one over there at the University of Nebraska. I mean, I'm not saying Matt Rhule is a bad coach. I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I'm not saying that. I mean, he's 18-16. He's doing something right. But why are you extending a guy who was already on the contract for the end of the decade 2 more years? Good luck. That's why when you guys went to the Big Ten, or whatever the hell whatever the frick they call themselves now. That's why you're a laughing stock now, and that's why you're in the plummets where you're at. Good luck with that one. And also over the weekend, it was the deal between ESPN and YouTube TV. Well, first of all, I own neither of them because I don't waste my time with that garbage. Anybody that does is the problem, not this. But we're in 2025, and if you can't put something like that together in what's now the streaming service era the way it is, you're a flop. And that goes to both ESPN and YouTube TV. They're both are flops. That's why all that happened. And I don't feel sorry for anyone who ordered it. I don't feel sorry for anyone who wants to order it. I don't feel sorry for anyone who plans on ordering it because you guys are trash. It's plain and simple. Well, we know how ESPN operates. They've operated this since the turn of the century. They become nothing but propaganda since the 21st century turned. Everybody knows this. We know YouTube's gone on a lot of political, whatever the heck you want to call it, in the political field. I'm not even going to get into it. But these two deserve one another for bad business and how they carry themselves. Why? Because this is something I've said all along. If you can't find a way to come to a middle ground and meet up, especially in 2025 when everything is easily as accessible as it can be, you're a problem. And this falls not just on ESPN, but on YouTube TV also. I mean, you had ample opportunities to put this together and basically put it into it. It didn't happen. That's why we had what we have now. And we have people like Larry Holmes, one of the guys at the X platform who covers the NFL, calling the whole thing a disgrace. Problem is, Larry Holmes is the disgrace because he wanted to order it. Why? If you want to order something that's broken like this, you become the problem. I'm not. Everyone's talking about going to the Fire Stick. That's just what I would highly recommend because that's the era we're in. But everybody misses the big picture. Once again, we're on 2025. If you can't get any of this together the right way, you get everything you deserve, especially in the streaming service where everything is now accessible with a phone or a laptop or whatever it is. If you can't fix a deal to get this thing done, there's a lot of problems. And anyone that wants to partake and wants to complain about it is every bit the problem these two services are. And it is quite bad. That's why I'm staying away from it. That's why I don't order any of it, because it's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. It's an act of cowardice that's what's going on overall. And because of it, everybody's getting what they deserve. I'm sorry, but it is what it is. We're on 2025, and you can't figure this out. Especially everything being as easily as accessible as it is now. We have giant problems, especially with all of this. Do I think something will be done later rather than sooner? I'll just leave it at that. And over the weekend, it was the Los Angeles Dodgers winning the World Series, going back to back. This will sting the Toronto Blue Jays for a long time because you had ample opportunities in games 6 and 7 on your home field to win it and ice it and didn't get it done. And the experience of the Dodgers showed. I mean, the middle of that Blue Jays lineup is lethal as it gets. But you can't. You generated 7 runs in 2 games, the 2 games at your home field, and you got shut down basically both times, mainly by Yamamoto, who pitched the gym in Game 6, and then came back in Game 7 and shut you guys down. But you guys in Toronto going to be scratching your heads for a long time after this one because you had opportunities. You left so many men on base. You had opportunities to clinch it, couldn't get the key hits at the right moment, and decided to have. Really, you go back to Game 6. The final 3 outs were basically based on 2 terrible at bats. I mean, those at bats in Game 6 were just terrible. And your at bats toward the end of the game clinching Game 7 for LA were just as bad. And if you can't bat the way you guys did all season long at that possible time, you're begging for that to happen. And that's what happened to Toronto. And LA went back to back. And spare me the hypocrisy when we talk about buying a team. I get it. Major League Baseball has one of the weirdest imbalances when it comes to payrolls. I get it. But spare me the hypocrisy when it comes to buying the team because everybody spends. Some people don't want to spend. Some people don't want to break the bank. Some teams want to break the bank. Does Major League Baseball need a salary cap? Absolutely. I expect that to happen after the next lockout in 2027. But spare me the hypocrisy that a team was bought because it depends on who you are. Do you want to spend or do you not want to spend? I mean, everybody spends. Every team spends. Some people just want to spend nickels and dimes. Some people want to spend the $100 bills all about the Benjamins. That's the difference. Depends on what you want to spend and what you want to get. You spend more, you get a better quality product. That's what the Dodgers did over the last 2 seasons, and that's why they went back-to-back. Got to give them their due. But Toronto, that is going to kill you for the longest time. You had ample opportunities to really seize control and really win it. You had some terrible at-bats in the last innings of your 2 home games in Games 6 and 7. That's why LA's winning, celebrating the World Series, and you're not. And it's going to sting for a while. Now to the world of boxing. Happy 76th birthday to our top 5 all-time great heavyweight Larry Holmes. A career like none other. Spanned from the back end of the middle of the 70s through the 2002 when he had a novelty fight against Butterbean. But the career speaks for itself. One-time sparring partner for guys like Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, Ernie Shavers, and Jimmy Young. Arguably the greatest left jab in boxing history. Bursting into the scene in 1978 when he won the heavyweight title from Ken Norton. And a classic where featured a winner-take-all 15th round to win the title, and Holmes won it. The 2-fight series with Ernie Shavers, where the second fight, Larry Holmes went to the well after getting pounded to the canvas early, came back and just battered Ernie Shavers to a stoppage win. Who can forget what he did in 1982 when he beat Jerry Cooney in a highly anticipated matchup that was the highest grossing gate in heavyweight title history at the time, to, many more title defenses, a reign that spanned 7.5 years, 20 successful title defenses. Of course, they had the 2 losses to Michael Spinks, came back, lost to Mike Tyson, but after the Tyson loss, took a little time off, basically re-elevated himself to a top 5 all-time great heavyweight when he stunned Ray Mercer in 1992 in a fight where nobody thought Holmes would win. He put on a jabbing clinic to Ray Mercer and showed why he had the greatest left jab in boxing history. 4 months later, he gives Evander Holyfield all he can handle for the heavyweight title, had him hurt in the last 3 rounds, but it was a case of too little, too late. What made Larry Holmes tick? And we talk about the left jab, we can talk about it all the time. I mean, we know it does. Larry Holmes was a cerebral fighter in that ring. We talk about ring IQ, ring generalship. For his time, Larry Holmes mastered it. And he certainly was one of a kind. We talk about his run, 7.5 years, 20 successful title defenses against, the best he could fight at the time. Remember, after Ali, the heavyweight division sort of hit a bit of a flat period, but you can only beat who was in front of you, and that's what Larry Holmes did for his 20 successful title defenses. Went to the record of 48-0, looked like he was going to surpass Rocky Marciano's mark. Then Michael Spinks happened, the 2 fights. Then the Mike Tyson fight happened. But as I said, when he beat Ray Mercer in 92, re-elevated himself and showed the whole world wide just how great he was in his heyday. Because that was that turn back the clock performance. You could probably, I call that his second greatest performance ever behind the Cooney fight. Because everything was written against Larry Holmes going into the fight against Ray Mercer, who like 5 months before just mantled Tommy Morrison, and many thought he was going to do the same again. After the second or third round, Larry Holmes found his jab, kept Mercer at bay at it, and just put on a jabbing clinic and showed the whole world why he's a top 5 all-time great heavyweight. And that left jab, arguably the greatest ever. It wasn't one of those pity-pat jabs that kept you at bay. He put some emphasis on it and made you stay away. And that's why his jab, arguably the greatest in boxing history. So happy 76th birthday to Larry Holmes. You're certainly one of the GOATs in heavyweight history. Nobody today is going to touch your run of 7.5 years and 20 successful title defenses. It's one of its kind, and it stands on its own. Now we're going to fast forward a few years to one of the pillars of the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry. We're going to go south of the lightweight division, featuring 2 standout super bantamweights. This was Wilfredo Gomez and Carlos Zarate. Zarate was a longtime bantamweight champ, moving up to challenge Gomez's super bantamweight title. A combined 73 wins, 72 knockouts, the highest KO ratio between 2 champions and a championship fight in boxing history. Think about 73 wins, 72 knockouts, no loss. The only blemish was a draw on Wilfredo Gomez's record from early in his career. When you talk about these 2 fighters, do-it-all fighters, Wilfredo Gomez, probably the greatest. Wilfredo Gomez probably has a distinction of the greatest fighter to come out of Puerto Rico. And at that time, Zarate challenging for the distinction of the greatest Mexican fighter at that time. This is before guys like Salvador Sanchez, Julio Cesar Chavez, Canelo Alvarez, them guys came along. We talk about we talk about these two fighters, and we think about, first we'll talk about Carlos Zarate, one-time fighter of the year 1977, one of the 20 greatest punchers of all time in the Ring magazine when it had their 100-year edition way back when. One of the winning the title from Nestor Jimenez to win that title. Made a couple of defenses before he moved up to fight Gomez. One of the more exciting action-packed fighters. I guess another action-packed fighter in Wilfredo Gomez. As I said about Gomez, maybe the distinction of the greatest Puerto Rican fighter of all time. A couple others might have to share it, but he had that distinction at that point. You know, winning the bantamweight and super bantamweight title. He had a long streak, knockout streak continuing going into this. Is it won every fight by knockout? And we have two guys who have high knockout ratios. You'd expect a lot of fury, and that's what you got when you talk about Gomez and Zarate. Over live at the Roberto Clemente Stadium in San Juan, Puerto Rico, the backyard of the standout Wilfredo Gomez. A lot of accusations before the fight that Zarate wasn't feeling well, couldn't make weight, or we know how all that goes before what's about to happen, especially back then. Because remember, with these little guys, when they weight cut, it's different than bigger guys weight cutting. So we talk about the fact that this guy had to find ways to make 122. But remember, Wilfredo Gomez, he also had trouble making 122. So both guys had to find ways to make the super bantamweight limit to make this a legit championship title fight. So we talk about this particular fight. Two action-packed fighters, especially in the early rounds. You got all the action because that's what Gomez and Zarate were. Both guys, even fight, could have gone either way, every single way possible after the first 3.5 rounds. And the pressure of Gomez started to take over. And what happened was having a struggle to make weight started to get to Zarate. And Gomez started to take over. Gomez, as Zarate was trying to charge Gomez started to time him. And as a result, every time Gomez started to hit Zarate would try to counter and miss. And that was where the difference was started to show. And Zarate started to find himself on the canvas a couple times. The real controversial one took place in the 5th round, where it was a right hand that put Zarate on the canvas, but Gomez allegedly hit him while he was on the canvas. And the referee, Harry Gibbs of England, said, fair play. And that's what he called it. So he goes up, but he gets up, and after that point, it was Gomez who continued the pressure, and the corner of Carlos Zarate stopped the fight. Wilfredo Gomez wins this Mexican-Puerto Rican showdown on a 5th round technical knockout to continue his knockout streak of 22 straight wins by knockout. I've always said when you talk about the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry, when you get this, there's an extra passion that comes out with the respective countries and the respective fighters when you talk about a Puerto Rican fighting a Mexican or vice versa, because that's what you get. And that's what happened for as long as this could when you talk about Wilfredo Gomez and Carlos Zarate. Two very strong action-packed fighters, two very strong good fighters who gave the best that they could do. And as a result, but as I said, the skill and the high-level experience at big fights with Wilfredo Gomez, even though he had fewer fights than Zarate, showed. And when he started the adjustment of making Zarate miss and making him pay, that was the difference. Wilfredo Gomez, we talk about the Latino fighters, don't get talked about enough, but he's certainly a top 10 in the Latino community. And he's certainly, his career accolades speak for itself. We talk about some of the great Puerto Rican fighters that came out of there. Of course, him, Wilfred Benitez, you know, his fights with Ray Leonard, Roberto Durant, and Thomas Hearns. And other guys such as Felix Trinidad, Miguel Cotto, just to name a few. Esteban de Jesus, who's not talked about enough, known for his trilogy with Roberto Duran. Wilfredo Gomez is up there among the all-time great Puerto Rican and Latin American fighters. And his career resume speaks for itself. A guy who can fight anybody in any era south of the lightweight division, because he was do it all. I mean, he had the punch, obviously, because he knew where to hit you. That's what he did as guys like Carlos Zarate and Lupe Pintor. But his skill level was underrated, not talked about enough, and certainly one of the pillars of the great Puerto Rican fighters and the heat of some of the great Mexican Puerto Rican fights. We talk about him against Zarate, Danny Little Red Lopez, Lupe Pintor, and of course, when he got begludged by Salvador Sanchez, was a pillar of when the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry at that time was the rivalry. Because every time you had a Mexican-Puerto Rican fight, whether it be Puerto Rico and Mexico or in the States or any part of the globe, they're always packed a house, split down the middle with countries, all kinds of salsa band wars, all kinds of verbal chant wars. And you talk about a passion, that was a passion way back then. We talk about Mexico versus Puerto Rico. I mean, still is to this day, but not quite it was back in the 80s when the passion was like none other. That's what Sanchez versus Gomez, these rivalries were. Especially we talk about Wilfredo Gomez against Carlos Zarate. Because Zarate was training up to become one of the all-time great Mexican fighters. At that time, it was Ruben Olivares. And this is before Salvador Sanchez and Julio Cesar Chavez came along. That was the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry passion. I mean, still exists to this day, but not quite it did back then. I mean, you want to talk about going at it. I mean, think about a like rival soccer chants at the World Cup. That's what Mexican-Puerto Rican boxing was. And the fans were throwing crazy, nasty chants at one another. Salsa band wars between Mexican and Puerto Rican salsa bands. It had all the goods. And of course, the fighters, the passion they showed, it rubbed up to their respective fans and vice versa. That's what happened when you had a Mexican-Puerto Rican fight way back when. We talk about Gomez versus Zarate. Certainly was one of them. First 3.5 rounds, all you can give till the conditioning of Zarate took over and the skill level of Gomez showed us difference. Because in case of making Zarate miss and making him pay, floored him 3 times, being one of them under funky circumstances, started to administer a beating to where the Zarate corner stopped the fight. And that's how Wilfredo Gomez retained the super bantamweight title. Wilfredo Gomez, one of the top 10 all-time great Latino fighters. We talk about guys like Roberto Duran, Alexis Arguello, Salvador Sanchez, Julio Cesar Chavez. He's up there with them. To want a guy like Rufer Benitez is Puerto Rican. Some of the great Mexicans like Juan Manuel Marquez, Eric Morales, and Marco Antonio Barrera, who came around in the 2000s. Of course, a couple of guys from down south, most notably Eder Joffre, one of the premier, probably the greatest bantamweight of all time. He's in that conversation. Maybe Esteban de Jesus, who gave Roberto Duran 3 tough fights at the lightweight division. Ask Roberto Duran about Esteban de Jesus, he'll tell you all about him. He's in that conversation. And Ruben Olivares, obviously, who was knocking on the door for the greatest Mexican fighter of all time till Sanchez and Chavez came around. Ricardo Lopez from Mexico. Plethora of all-time great Latino fighters. And this guy that won it, Wilfredo Gomez, is certainly in the middle of that mix. Just as great as anyone. You could also make the case that he has a distinction of the greatest fighter to come out of Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico's had their share of terrific fighters. Said Wilfredo Gomez, Wilfred Benitez, even guys like Felix Trinidad, Esteban de Jesus, and Miguel Cotto, just to name a few. He's in that conversation. Terrific, terrific fighter. Same with Carlos Zarate. All action. Just a terrific fighter himself. Brought the action, brought the goods. He and Gomez delivered it when they fought at the Roberto Clemente Stadium in San Juan, Puerto Rico. If you ever want to watch a real fight, always watch ones of the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry. Because it's not just Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry in the ring. It expands to the fans, to the media members, to the salsa band wars. I mean, there were salsa band wars between Mexico and Puerto Rico back then. Think about it. I mean, it was the same way when Sanchez and Chavez fought. When Sanchez and Gomez fought, it was the same way when Edwin Rosario and Julio Cesar Chavez fought. They were having salsa band wars, and the fans were going at each other in the stands. Mexico, Puerto Rico, that was passion. We don't see that anymore today in the sport, and there's a lot of reasons for it. And I conclude with some theatrics. This one took place 34 years ago. Actually, it was Halloween of 1991 at outside Washington, D.C. It was the first of 2 fights between Riddick Bowe and Elijah Tillery. For every passionate fight you have with Gomez and Zarate, we have that polar opposite, which was the first meeting between Riddick Bowe and Elijah Tillery. Riddick Bowe was on the come-up. Elijah Tillery, basically a journeyman. All kinds of craziness before the fight. Apparently, it's a neighborhood war that goes back to their teenage years where they just hated one another. The story of this one was after round 1, when Elijah Tillery basically was just trying to survive the round because he knew what Riddick Bowe was going to do to him. Riddick Bowe blows a kiss, and Elijah Tillery just resorts to kicking, and then we have a wild melee in the middle of the ring. I mean, when was the last time you heard that in a Riddick Bowe fight? A melee in the middle of the ring after a round. Rock Newman comes, they're still pounding each other. Rock Newman bear hugs Elijah Tillery, and Bowe punches both Newman and Tillery off the ring apron, through the ropes, onto the floor. That's the theatrics of the sport. That's also the theatrics of what Riddick Bowe and Rock Newman were all about. And that's all they were about. They weren't about greatness. They were about theatrics. And this fight was the epitome of what Riddick Bowe and Rock Newman were all about, because they didn't care about anything else. I can trace onto the long log they had when it comes to theatrics, because it's a long log. You can probably stuff the national debt with it. But Riddick Bowe was the perfect case of one of those guys that should have been more than what he was. And it's largely because the theatrics around him, the people around him, the bad habits in and out of the ring. His lookout was Elijah Tillery was looking to survive. And because what happened at the end of the round, and because Riddick Bowe triggered him, that's why we had what we had. We talk about Bowe Tillery won. Now, of course, they had a rematch several months later where Tillery just survived the first 2.5 rounds till Bowe broke his nose and turned his face inside out. But this was the epitome of who Riddick Bowe was in and out of the ring. And it slowly caught up to him. But maybe after seeing what's happened to Bowe and Newman after the belt dumping in the garbage can to Duck Lennox Lewis, maybe we should have seen this coming from them two on this night. I said the biggest lookout was Elijah Tillery was just there to survive, just to be a body. That's what happened. And Riddick Bowe won by disqualification, and rightfully so, because Elijah Tillery just couldn't stop throwing kicks to the area where Riddick Bowe can't produce babies. But that was what happened. And because because Elijah Tillery was so triggered, that's what led to the disqualification. And one of the more wilder scenes, one of the many wild scenes that surrounded Riddick Bowe and Rock Newman throughout their professional careers. I mean, everybody's going to point to a whole lot of things, but you could probably say this, what took place 34 years ago at Washington, D.C., started it. Maybe you should have seen this coming all along. We talk about using apartheid to sell the fight with Pierre Kutzer, to the punching of Larry Donald at the press conference, to throw a jug at Jorge Luis Gonzalez. And of course, the cultivation was the first fight with Andrew Galata, where we know what happened with that one. But what happened between Bowe and Tillery the first time, we should have seen it coming as to what Riddick Bowe and Rock Newman were all about. I mean, a good fight, a very, very good heavyweight. I mean, Riddick Bowe was a bit of a trendsetter, a 6'5" heavyweight who wanted to mix it up. And of course, he did win the title from Evander Holyfield. But when you have the kind of strange and almost twisted mind of a manager like Rock Newman, who was in this for the wrong reasons and wanted someone to bring down with him, because that's what happened even to Riddick Bowe's accusation of it. And you have this, that you reveal who you are at the end of the day. And that's what Riddick Bowe and Rock Newman did. We talk about all the theatrics throughout the career, from probably saying started on this night when he did Elijah Tillery. Tillery was rightfully disqualified, rightfully, because you're throwing kicks and punches after the bell was sounded. I mean, granted, Riddick Bowe provoked it. All he did was blow a kiss. Elijah Tillery just got triggered and fell for it. But we should have seen it then, what Riddick Bowe and Rock Newman were made of. And that's what happened from here forward. And Riddick Bowe was as talented as anyone. Just he and Rock Newman had something special, but they were in this for the wrong reasons. And it showed as their careers went on, and it bottomed out in 1996. Fight game, here's the thing. Maybe the worst thing that happened to the fight game is everyone gets caught up in all of the hoopla, especially we talk about how the business of wrestling is, and now sometimes how MMA is, because MMA has their own share, especially in the UFC. And boxing was portrayed in that particular way. And of course, we had Ali Frazier, which was a whole different shebang. I'm leaving that out of it. But when you constantly, and I'm talking one or two isolated incident, when you're constantly trying to milk the theatrics and the dollars in the ways that does not describe what the product is, and the way Riddick Bowe and Rock Newman did throughout the better half of their careers, their times together, it's going to catch up to you. And that's what happened. And maybe in hindsight, when you think of what happened about the Riddick, Bowe, and Rock Newman, all their theatrics, from, everything I can list, the punching of Larry Donald, the boat in the garbage can of Duck Lennox Lewis, the riot with Andrew Galata. You could say it started 34 years ago on Halloween, 1991 in Washington, D.C., when this took place against Elijah Tillery, because that's what they were all about at the end of the day. Granted, it is a money-making business, and that's what you're in this for. But if you're doing it and making money for the wrong reasons, and you wind up the way everything ended up for him, being Riddick Bowe, that's going to be the lasting memory. And it's unfortunate for a fighter who had all the goods. And we say this all the time. The same thing happened with Mike Tyson. With Don King, John Horn, and Roy Holloway. They did the same thing. Same thing happened with Riddick Bowe and Rock Newman. Common denominator, the people around them were in this for the wrong reasons. The two fighters were the victims of it. That's all that has to be said. And on that note, I will wrap up this edition of Sir Hunt on X on the 3rd of November, 2025. Tomorrow night, I will have a super show dedicated to arguably the greatest trilogy of the modern era. Actually, one of the fighters was involved in this. I just mentioned him not too long ago. I will be talking about that. As always, if you missed any part of this show or some of the shows of the past, you can catch it on the Apple Podcasts and the iHeartRadio apps. If you want to catch the audio and video version, it'll be both on the Spotify app. And now the Patreon app is going to have the archived podcast also, if you want to listen to any of those. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in all walks of life. If you take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. If you don't take care of yourself first, good luck. Take care of yourself. Focus on you. Stay true to yourself. Good things will come your way. Always concentrate on you. That's how you get successful in life. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless. And I will see you soon.